Sometimes when it's time to get down, you just got to make a decision and go, and today, LAPD does. Hi everyone, welcome to today's badge cam lesson here at Active Self-Protection. Every day of the year, we post a new lesson of an analyzed use of force content caught on video so that your training and practice can be more research informed. I'm your host, John Correa.
And I'm your co-host, 30-year law enforcement veteran, Mike Williver. Today's video comes to us from the Newton Division of the LAPD.
MagTech is the only freedom seed I use on the range. I personally have over 100,000 rounds downrange of MagTech, and it's unbelievably reliable, very accurate, and a great value. Pick some up for your next range trip wherever you shop for range supplies. Neighbor who is well known in the community is walking around tossing stuff left and right. He's got mental health issues, and he's gonna come back and threaten another resident with a knife, which is gonna prompt a whole bunch of 911 calls. So again, this guy's well known, he's got drug issues, he's got mental health problems as well, and those tend to go hand in hand. See him there with the knife in his hand. They call the cops. Let's listen in when the cops show up.
He has a knife on him right now? He kind of brought it out to me. Just be careful. He's real skinny, older gentleman.
Okay.
He's intoxicated.
He's intoxicated? So what's he been doing?
He's been taking the knife out. Right now he kind of like, I'll press charges. He actually went like that.
He went like...
Yeah. I was trying to help the guys out when they're picking up the trash. And then he's like, and then he went like, I'll get the video. He's cool though, he's an older gentleman. I mean, he's just very intoxicated.
Yeah, what did he tell you?
I'll stab your ass Mexican. I'm Salvadorian though.
I'll stab you. Okay.
But yeah, just be careful please.
Have you guys usually called him before?
We got a couple calls when he was messing with the gas in his room, and you guys came over.
Okay.
But nothing happened. But today he's very...
Where is he at right now?
He's by the trash in the corner in the hallway.
He's by the trash? What floor is it?
6th floor.
6th floor?
Yeah.
Okay, 6th floor.
There's video footage.
I've sped more of this up just for the sake of time. You can watch it from the original, which is linked in the description if you like, but they are going to get upstairs in the elevator, and then they're gonna encounter him just as soon as the elevator opens, and it's all gonna go to heck from there. Let's listen in.
Billy, stop.
Hey, Billy, put it down.
Hey, Billy, don't go for that knife, Billy. Don't go for that knife. Billy, stop.
Hey, Billy, put it down.
Hey, Billy, don't go for that knife. Don't go for that knife. Billy, stop.
Hey, Billy, put it down.
Don't go for that knife.
Immediately after this, officers are going to render aid to the man. They got the knife away from him. He dropped it as he fell. They did render aid to him the best that they could. They actually end up, if you watch the longer original, they end up putting him in the elevator, taking him downstairs for paramedics to get there. Their comms were very good on the radio. Unfortunately, this man died of his injuries, and no officers or other members of the public were harmed. How many times have we made the joke that Gold Dot beat knife in Rochambeau?
Quite a few. We made a joke before we hit the record button that we can't repeat, but it's really funny, I swear, I promise.
It's pretty good. There's no question that post-pandemic, we are in a significant mental health crisis. And as somebody who has real personal experience with people in mental health crisis, when they have kind of a psychotic break, when things start going weird, whether that's schizophrenic episode, I can't tell you what is going on exactly with this man, but when they get violent, and they're very seldom violent, most people who are having, significant mental health episodes are a danger to themselves and not to somebody else. But the ones who are dangerous to others, which again are a small minority, are very dangerous to others. And so I just can't say enough, that person that's standing in the hallway needs to get out of that hallway and lock the door. And if one of the people here had dealt with this guy as a deadly threat, Mike, I think it would have been 100% justified.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's so critical in this day and age now that all our officers and deputies, anybody public facing, has as much mental health crisis intervention training as they can possibly get. It's not mumbo. I think some people think it's mumbo jumbo and it's not going to do anything. We've seen time and again on the channel where it was extremely effective. Now, not all people can be de-escalated, right? You can't de-escalate someone. They have to be willing to de-escalate themselves. You can help them down that path. When someone is in this guy's position and situation, the odds of that working are very, very slim. And what I'm seeing here from this, whoever this resident is at the end of the hallway, they're familiar with this guy. They've never seen him stab anyone. So in their threat level is lower. They just don't feel like this guy's actually going to do anything like that. You're gonna risk your life on that. You're gonna bet your life on it. So if you're not armed and ready to deal with this, I would really recommend getting the heck out of Dodge, go back to your room, go down the stairs, get as far away from this guy as you can, because he's not dangerous and he's not deadly. He's not going to kill anybody until he does, until that moment comes where he decides, okay, well, screw it. I am going to stab someone and it's you. Don't be that person. And I think with a lot of people, and unfortunately with some officers, as we've seen over the last couple of months of badge cams, do not perceive a threat, do not perceive danger like some others of us do. So anyway, find yourself in this position, get the heck out of Dodge, please.
And listen, I think that the residents and the security guard here, they deal with this guy every day. They've dealt with his kind of low-level BS on a regular basis, his struggles and challenges. I don't want to dehumanize him, but recognize that when you call police, which was the right decision here, this guy's threatening people with a knife, they don't have that history with him, and it's a high probability because of their uniform. When they show up, that could very well escalate the problem. So remember, when you call the police to deal with something like this, and Mike, we've talked about this all the time, they bring every force option to the table, including deadly force. It wasn't a problem to me here. I think it was the right answer, but people sometimes go, well, I never would have called the cops if I thought they were going to end up shooting him. Well, goodness sakes, man, that's on this guy who pulled a knife on the cops.
Yeah, and you don't know, as a responding officer, I've seen a million news stories where like, well, I can't believe the officer did what he or she did. And they're saying that because they're in the situation, they're familiar with the parties involved, and they feel like this guy never would have lunged, this never would have happened. The fact is, if you call the police, understand that violence up into and including deadly force is on the table, no matter what the call is. If someone acts in a certain way that the officers feel threatened, they're going to respond accordingly. Not that anybody was saying they overreacted here, but I think it's important to realize if you call the police, they're bringing guns with them. They're bringing deadly force with them potentially. So don't be surprised if that gets utilized. They don't know this guy like the residents do. They don't know this guy like the security officer does. And as John said, frequently a police uniform will escalate the situation because a bad guy or someone in a mental state might see them as a threat, might see them as, oh no, I'm going to jail. Therefore, he'll respond differently. That's a real thing. So bear that in mind. If you call the police, this is a possible outcome.
Now, as they get up the stairs, they took the security guard in the elevator with them. We can debate whether that was a good idea because maybe they leave him downstairs, but he's got all the keys. He knows the lay of the land. Maybe I need him. But I really do think, Mike, this was a mistake, letting him be in front, because that's the closest place to danger if danger is outside that door, which we're going to find out it is. So I think a little bit of prior planning, as it were, to say, hey man, you need to get behind us, let me be in the lead in case there's a danger here, I can deal with it and not have to worry about you, would have probably been a better choice.
Yeah, we talked about this, of course, before we hit the record button. John and I talk about the points we're going to discuss. And what I said, and I stand by this, is he wouldn't have been up there in the elevator with me. I know I'm probably going to have a very narrow hallway once I get up there. If I need a key, if I get to a point where he's behind a locked door, I'm going to go down and say, hey, give me your keys. Which key gets into that room? We're not going to debate Fourth Amendment law right now. We're assuming you have the ability legally to go into a room or whatever space it is. I'm not bringing them upstairs unless I absolutely have to. But if you find yourself in this position, you're like, oh, wait a minute, this guy's here. There's a potential danger of him getting stabbed as soon as that door opens, as we saw. At least get him behind you, or hit the next button and drop him off on the second floor, whatever you got to do. But don't let him be there when the door opens. And I'm sure that probably occurred to them just as that door started to open. A little too late, but good training point, good mental rep.
This is why we try to stay ahead of the problem, right? What problem could we encounter the next step? And if we can stay ahead of the problem, we're staying ahead of where the issues are. We can set ourselves up for the best success and not have to deal with them in an emergency. It's just a prior planning issue. Now, everything goes south, of course, when the door opens and our perp sees a whole bunch of people. And I don't even know if he recognized them as cops, but what we can see here, Mike, of course, is he sees the door open and immediately pulls a knife. Now, this guy has committed aggravated assault with a deadly weapon against at least one of the residents of the home. So he's threatened somebody with a knife a little bit earlier. They called 911. That's what the officers heard. He's threatening people with a knife. And then from a very short distance to the guard here, he is threatening with a knife as well because he pulls it out of his pocket. Is this justified use of deadly force? Yes, it is. Every day of the week, this is justified use of deadly force. And I've linked the district attorney's discussion of this in the description. It's a very good and detailed description. And listen, this one's a no-brainer. Now, might we wish he would have chosen differently? Yes, but I think this is an excellent marker, Mike, that it's the actions of the person the police are investigating that have a definitive vote in what happens.
Yeah, this again, I have nothing to add to that. That was perfectly stated. I would say 100% to that, John. What I will say here, however, is to your previous point, John, about having the security officer in this position is, well, now shoot, I have to start putting rounds towards this guy, and I have this person now in between me and the bad guy. So he's at risk of getting stabbed, and he's now also at risk of potentially getting shot if this officer, if he moves the wrong way, it's a split second. Now he's got a round of 9mm or 45 or whatever it was through his arm, or God forbid through his chest or through the back of his head. So another point as to why we don't want this guy standing where he's standing. Did they expect the door to open and dude's right there and he immediately pulls a knife? No, but that should have been a consideration, right? That should have been something we thought, that's a possibility that could happen. Let's get this guy out of the way. As far as the shooting itself, look, you literally hate to see it. You would really rather this guy was able to get the help he needed, the psychiatric help he needed, the medication he needed, or whatever. But the officers, look, they're the lowest rung on the societal ladder. You don't call them because things are going great. You call the police because things are going poorly and you have no other options. So now the police are there. They have to do what they did. They have no choice. There's no time to de-escalate. There's no time to say, hey, are you sure about that? Hey, buddy, let's talk about this. He's walking towards them with a large, medium-sized kitchen knife in their hand. They had to shoot him. That's the bottom line.
They had no time to de-escalate. They didn't even have time to identify themselves, though, of course, the uniforms and the badges would have done that. Now, the first officer here's a moment for all of our old school boomers. The officer in our current badge cam is carrying a 40 by God 5 as Jesus and John Moses Browning intended. And those are highly effective. Now, that said, if you go read the report from the district attorney, he was hit twice in the abdomen. We're going to see a little bit later the angle of his firing, but he hit low. And from a very short distance, this is very common. Again, most cops aren't gun folk, and they don't do a lot of gun training. They do more than the average private citizen, but they don't do very much conservatively to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to be of high skill. So even from this relatively short distance, which is probably 10 to 12 feet away, he hit lower than we would say. Now, it was effective, but that low push, Mike, is something that a lot of people struggle with, and it's something that you can train out of pretty easy.
Yeah, so a lot of the comments on the original video that John told me about were, hey, he's point shooting. So point shooting is when you bring your gun up to your eye level and you kind of reference your sights and just generally aim the gun in the direction you want the rounds to go. It's something that can be done. It can be done at short distances. Sometimes people think it's faster. I'm not an expert on whether or not it's advisable or not advisable. But the fact is, he got a little bit low. It turns out it was effective, right? But at the end of the day, you want your rounds to be, especially at this distance, if you don't get effective rounds on target very, very quickly, this person, 21-foot rule, Tooler principle, all that sort of thing, this person can be on top of you really quickly, stabbing that security guard, stabbing you, stabbing your partner. So effective rounds at short distance are critical because fortunately, wherever it hit, it affected the guy enough for him to fall back and not advance anymore. But I would rather see shots in center of mass that are more effective and are going to stop him faster. I think a little bit of luck was involved here and the guy not advancing farther than he did.
Yeah, and handguns are, about 85% of people shot with a handgun survive. And so this guy hit twice. You see it kind of knocks him back. Again, part of his, his mental challenges. He was seeing what was going on, but I don't think was ready to get shot. He was not highly resilient to that. I think that's a good thing. Now, our second officer fires one shot as well. She gets her gun out. I want to mention a couple things here. Number one, how fast do you want to be able to do that? Remember, misses are a really hard way. It's really hard to miss fast enough to win a gunfight. It is really easy to hit slow enough to lose one. So how fast do you want to be able to get that gun out? Very fast. And also, our female officer here missed, right? She shot one shot. Our other male officer hit him twice with 45. She's shooting 9mm. And missed. So we know which ones hit and which ones didn't because of calibers of bullets they found in the guy. and missing. I'm going to almost guarantee you, she shot low left here as a right-handed shooter. So do you want to be fast out of the holster? Yes, and accurate both. Which one's more important, Mike? Speed or accuracy? My answer is yes.
Yes, absolutely. I think obviously she got her gun out very quickly, so I commend her for that. You have to shoot. You have to shoot at the speed of your own competence. You should know yourself well enough and know your ability well enough to know I need that extra fraction of a second to be deliberate and get my rounds on target. Now, easy for us to say, right? Me and John are sitting comfortable in an air-conditioned environment and no one's trying to kill us. But my point is, if you're in this position, if you are the officer, you need to have that confidence in your equipment, that confidence in your abilities, your marksmanship, your judgment, that you can do this very, very quickly. I think she just got that gun out really fast and pulled the trigger, says there's a threat, it's close to me, I need to do something right now. And that low left, unfortunately, is not gonna stop anything. You're not gonna scare a bad guy or a mentally unstable person with the sound of a gunshot, right? They're only gonna stop doing what they're doing if you force them to, if you disable them. So I think great out of the holster. You just need that extra split second to be deliberate and get around effectively on target where it belongs.
That's where it is. Effective rounds. Now, I will say she does a really, really good job here of continuing to find work. When the other officer cuts in front of her, she dips her muzzle. That's really good awareness of where her firearm is pointed. And she moves over to his other side so that she has a view of what's going on and can continue to work. So that tells me she's still in the problem-solving mode of her brain. She's in the thinking mode of her brain. She's not panicking, and she's looking for work. So for that, I think we should commend her, Mike.
100%. Let's talk for a minute about lowering the gun. This is something we've seen go both ways in all the badge cams I've done. You'll see officers who fail to do so or don't realize they're pointing a gun at someone, and others who you couldn't run fast enough right to left to where they couldn't dip the gun in time, right? So I think this is one of those drills that I thought was just the dumbest thing ever in firearms class, where we all had blue guns and we're going in a figure eight and just dipping that muzzle every time someone gets in front of you, up, down, to the point where you can't get it wrong. Muzzle discipline, like trigger discipline, those are two things you absolutely have to ingrain in your brain so much that you can't mess it up. You can't get it wrong. She didn't think about lowering her gun, I promise you. That just happened because she's done it 1,000 times in training. So that's a great training point. If you're not training dipping your muzzle with blue guns or with inert guns or whatever, that's something you should think about doing. It's not a complicated drill to do. It's not expensive to do. You don't expend any ammunition doing it. So if you haven't added that to your training in your department, in your agency, it's something to think about doing. In fact, I would really prefer that you do that so that your officers are safe out there and they're not accidentally muzzling each other.
Yeah, I really agree with that. So that's a training ahead of time issue. I think, was she justified to shoot the guy? Yes. Was she justified to shoot at him? Yes. Now, interestingly here, the third officer, he said he dipped back behind, and so he didn't shoot because he couldn't see anything. And I think that's really, really good information. Now, I do want to go back briefly here, Mike, to our first officer, because you can see him over to the right here on camera. And what I want to notice here is, why is he hitting low? Well, he is point shooting. You can see that the line of the gun is below his line of sight. So he is shooting over the top of his muzzle. And so he's estimating that he's shooting higher than he did. Now, it was effective. And I notice people are like, well, in a real gunfight, you're just going to point shoot. If that's what all you're expecting of yourself, maybe you are. But I think if instead you use those bumpy things on top of the gun and you can see a flash sight picture, the gun comes up and you get more effective hits. Now, it did work. So don't hear me saying that this wasn't good. It worked okay, but I have seen people gut shot with a 45 that it didn't stop them. So it's just worth saying, hey, get a flash picture of those sights if you possibly can.
Yeah, I've had people on the podcast who have either shot or been shot in the gut. A gut shot is generally probably the most survivable shot that there is, right? There's a lot of stuff down there, below the sternum, but not much of it is going to kill you immediately if you're shot or stabbed in it. So that's just something to bear in mind. I do want to go back to the piece John was talking about. The officer who's badge camera watching realizes, I don't have a shot here. These other officers who have a full view of this suspect have priority of fire. I'm going to just back up and let out of the way. That's not cowardly. That's not him not doing his job. That's him thinking this is the right move right now. If I try to cram in there, all I'm going to do is bump into them and mess up their ability to shoot this guy effectively. So kudos to him for realizing that's the position I'm in. If this guy comes around any further around the corner, then I've got a shot to take. Otherwise, I'm going to let my partners, I'm going to trust them their skills and their ability and their equipment are going to save the day and handle this for me. I think this was great and a great training point. The fact that it's not always necessary for you to get out and get in the action.
Yeah, I think that he did a really good job of recognizing, nope, I couldn't see nothing. And by the time I did, it wasn't good for me to shoot, so I didn't. Well, good and good for him. Now, of course, I'm going to just make the obligatory thing that LAPD, you need to get pork chop mics. You guys need to get lapel mics. Goodness sakes, what the heck is wrong with you? I think it was kind of funny that I think a sergeant here that we're looking at right now had what looked to me like a third generation Smith & Wesson. Whew, almost time to retire, Sarge, if you're running a third gen Smith, friend. That's an ancient handgun right there, boy. That's like a lightsaber in the hands of an ancient Jedi. But bigger point, he talked really well on the radio, did a really good job of coordinating what was going on. I think they were really good at their medical stuff and well done for them. These officers were put in a tough spot. They did what they had to do. They got the hits that they needed to do. They covered their ass.